What if, though, Gen Z was the generation to set the standard again? What if Gen Z set... If you're still breathing, God's not done with you. So clock in and get to work. Yeah! You're watching The Night Shift, where we discuss how young Christians can better live out their faith in a culture that is not conducive to Christianity. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership, which is something...
You scared me.
Hey, that's the intro, all right? I figured you'd be used to it by now. We're 7 episodes in, which is kind of crazy.
Oh my God.
I didn't think we'd make it this far. I'm going to be honest with you.
And we're still friends.
Yeah, I know. Usually, like, what we figured out is the closer that we get in proximity, the worse our relationship gets. We just need a healthy buffer, and then we're like the best friend siblings.
But I'm literally like moving across the street from you. Is that enough of a buffer?
I don't know. I might have to figure that out. I might have to move away. Tell them what we're talking about today, though.
So today we're going to be talking about leadership. This is a topic that I absolutely love because, as I've mentioned before, I kind of always end up in like leadership positions. So that's what we're going to be discussing today.
I love it. I'm more the reluctant leader. Like, I love setting the example, but I don't love exercising authority. That's one of those things that always cringes me out. Like, my least favorite thing in the world to do is telling other people what to do. I hate that. So I'm not going to ask you any questions. I see you've got the whole thing kind of written out and all that stuff. I'm just going to kind of let you go.
Cool.
And I'll be here in the corner when you need me.
Tag. We'll do it like that. Okay.
Sounds good.
So I like definitions, as we learned in our last podcast.
Yes.
So the definition of a leader, the act of leading a group of people or an organization. So it's kind of funny. It literally has like leadership, leading, kind of.
That's a terrible definition. I'm going to be honest with you. That's a very lazy.
Like the Webster's.
I know. They got lazy on that one.
Yeah.
They literally used the word lead in the definition.
So like to lead, you have to obviously have people following you. Oh, darn. I freaking put the verse down, but I didn't write it. And so now I actually have to pull out my Bible.
Oh, you have to go find the verse. What, you don't know it? Like, you don't know 12 verses just off the top of your head?
I know, it's quite a few.
No, she's literally about to read like 12 verses.
I'm not actually going to read 12 verses because that's a lot. But we'll start over here actually. So lots of highlighting there.
Yeah.
What I love about leadership is I'm a very, very, very firm believer in that the best way to lead is by serving. So that's how I've always kind of ended up in leadership positions, is by always being willing to serve, being willing to jump in, being willing to do the stuff that no one else really wants to do. So that would be something that I would just say, like, if you are in a position where you want to move up in your job or within your church or even in your family, take that servant role. It'll exponentially move you down the road so much quicker than by trying to climb a ladder. And I'm also a big believer in leading by example. So I'm not, and my whole team knows, like, they've never done anything that I myself have not already done or currently do. I'm never ever going to ask anyone to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. So
Right.
I had amazing examples of leaders and not so amazing examples of leaders. I remember I was working in a salon and I had maybe 10 minutes of a break that day to be able to eat lunch, like scarf as many calories down as I can, try to use the bathroom, like 10, 15 minutes, that's it. And she came in and was like, you really need to go sweep that floor. And I was like, I understand you're my boss. I understand that, like, you get to do that, but at the same time, why can't you go sweep and let me have my 10 minutes to eat the food that the only chance I'm going to get today. So that was an example that always made me go, okay, that's definitely not the leader that I want to be.
Right.
Ever. I want to be the kind that sees the needs of my team, that's willing to do whatever So yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of
and the
my-
difference that you're describing there is basically results driven leadership versus people driven leadership. And I think I've gone on a tangent about this many times that you've heard. But you can tell the difference very quickly between somebody that utilizes their people to get the result and people that are so focused on those that are underneath them that the result is almost just inconsequential. Like it
Yeah.
comes naturally. When you're so focused on investing in the people that are following you and making sure that they grow, the results are, you don't even necessarily have to worry about them. They just
Yeah.
come. And obviously, you set a goal, you set visions, all those things, but you're not beating people over the head with, hey, this needs to get done by X time. It's like, okay, how are you feeling about this skill set? How are you developing in this? How are you growing in this?
Yeah.
And if you're not, how can we make that happen? Right? It's about building people up, not building a program or an organization up.
And I have a hard time with that even as a leader now, because I love results and I love like completing something.
Well, who doesn't, right?
Like I'm very like task oriented, and I can forget about the people quite often, and I get a little my enthusiasm, we'll call it that, can come off as like kind of snappy sometimes, and I don't ever mean it that way. I'm just like, just get it done. So
As your brother, I don't feel like I it's appropriate for me to speak on that.
that's fair. I think that was a good thing. My enthusiasm is a good way to.
Very enthusiastic.
Very enthusiastic about
say
whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. You've got a lot of things
Yeah,
highlighted.
I do.
Let's keep going.
So, what I absolutely love, and I'm going to have Branson link this below. Oh, I'm not supposed to call you that.
Whatever. Who cares at this point?
I'm going to have this person
It's
link.
a crap show.
link this below. But this is the John Maxwell Leadership Bible. I love it because it has like so many different, like, in the Bibles, it has like the little bubbles. Like this is all based on leadership. So I actually really enjoy this Bible. But if you want to grow as a leader, I highly recommend reading 1st and 2nd Timothy, because this is where Paul, I think he's in prison. He's in prison a lot. So I think here he's in prison. And he's writing to Timothy, who is taking over the church. I think he was going to start pastoring. I want to say it was like, where was it? It says it somewhere. I don't know. A church somewhere. Somewhere in the world.
You can
Timothy's
tell we're highly
taking over
versed
a church.
theologians over here. We do a lot of theological research to prep for these things.
So, well, I mean, I even like read it and I was like, oh yeah, and I totally forgot where it was.
Okay, we'll keep going though.
Ephesus.
Forget that. Nobody cares.
Ephesus. So Timothy is starting to take over and become like the lead pastor, if you will, of the church in Ephesus.
Right.
And Paul's like kind of coaching him along how to do this well, how to put people in leadership, how to do this thing. And Timothy was super young. So what I love is in this Bible, it actually talks about like qualities of leadership. And if you read through 1 Timothy 3, it goes into like qualifications of like pastors, deacons, all of that. But I love how this breaks it down, because it actually goes into like just normal leadership wherever you're going to be. So one of the qualifications is to be blameless. And so the great question to ask is, am I quick to improve in the areas that I can see my integrity being damaged? So it's not like, oh, I'm blameless, because none of us are, truly. But okay, when something's brought to me, am I quick to correct that or speak into it or bring clarification? Be the spouse of one person. I think that was pretty good. I don't have multiple husbands or wives, or husbands and girlfriends, or however you want to not,
no side pieces
not multiple
over here.
people.
We don't mess with that.
But I love when it goes into the deeper question, am I loving my spouse as Christ loved the church? Mm-hmm. And that's like the harder thing to do, because I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here like, okay, do I love my husband as Christ loved the church? How can I be better in that? The next one was be temperate, sober-minded, and of good behavior. So am I a master of myself, or do other things control me? That I may be a servant to many. So that's kind of when that like servant part comes back in, right? So it's like I am a master of myself. Nothing is a master over me. I'm not dependent, though I am very dependent on caffeine, like highly
Well, it looks like you know what you need to work on then.
caffeine. But am I a master of myself so I can serve others?
Right.
Am I hospitable? So do I exhibit a warm and welcoming spirit? A lot of the times we think of hospital as actually having people in our homes. I agree and disagree with that. I feel like it is good to have people in your homes, but your home is also your sanctuary. And so that is a space that I think does need to be protected, especially if you're in leadership. There needs to be somewhere you can go, right? That's not like bombarded with people. Am I able to teach? So do I consistently help others learn to become better disciples? And kind of like going back to our topic of our last podcast, which was like discipleship and evangelism.
Yeah.
Am I able to do that well is how I feel. It's not like, am I able to get up in front of a ton of people and speak, but am I able to disciple well? So not giving into wine, like don't be drunk or on drugs.
That kind of goes back to being a master of yourself. I
Yeah.
think it all is in one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sober, watchful, diligent, so that I do not damage those who watch me. And I think that that part's kind of important. So I don't damage those who watch me. Even if I'm not drunk, you know, I remember one time I was out for somebody's birthday and I had a couple drinks at, it wasn't like a bar, but it was like a restaurant that also had a bar.
Chili's type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone literally sent something to my boss and was like, hey, I know y'all have someone in the safe house right now. Is she supposed to be drinking? And I was literally like, I wasn't doing anything. I had everything covered. I wasn't in the high up leadership role I am now, but it was still.
Yeah, you got.
I did, and I didn't even do anything wrong. But it was okay. So I don't damage those around me. Don't be violent or quarrelsome. Do I have an approachable, like, am I approachable? Or do I bring peace and healing to places where, and that doesn't mean like don't ever get into arguments, don't ever, but, oh, hi Dax.
But don't sow discord. Don't be a troublemaker.
Yeah,
You know? Yeah.
absolutely. Don't be greedy and covet. I can't say that word very well. Covetous.
You don't have to pronounce the T. It's just it. Covet.
Covet.
You don't have to T. It's just covet.
Covet. I have to.
Okay. What's the next one? What's the next one?
So a lot of, oh my goodness, Daxter. He's really.
There are
good at
two canines in the room, just in case you haven't noticed.
Yeah, and they really need my attention right now, apparently. So is my leadership controlled by the rich? So do I sometimes maybe give up my own values for money? Or do I want things that other people have? And that might be a position. Like, you know, if you're going to be in leadership, you know, or you're wanting to climb that ladder, don't covet the position that somebody else has. Rules his own house well. And I think, you know, that one's kind of hard for me because, like, I don't have kids. I don't have, like, I'm newly married. But I think, like, even going into, like, the order of my home. Like, if I can't even keep my home, like, cleaned or not, like, crazy clean, but picked up and, like, laundry, going dishes. If I can't do the little things in my house, how am I supposed to run anything else? And then the last one is don't be a novice. So am I a seasoned, solid, and experienced for both insiders and outsiders?
Yeah, you have to be competent in whatever you're leading.
Like something within.
Yeah. I would actually add one onto those.
Yeah.
And that would actually be something that I took from a show called Band of Brothers. We watched it a lot growing up.
Show.
There was a particular scene where the main officer in charge of this platoon that you're following throughout the show had another lower ranked officer just appointed below him. He was kind of new on the job. I think he was a butter bar at the time, which is what we call a second lieutenant.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
And he found out that his new second lieutenant had been playing cards and poker with all of his soldiers. And he was furious. And you didn't really know why at the time. Like, it's just an innocent game of poker, right? The new officer's trying to get to know the guys a little bit better. It's just relational equity. He picks him up, and the guy can't understand either. Like, why are you so angry about this? And he said these words: never put yourself in a position to take from these men. And I think that that's so integral as a leader. You are there to serve and nothing else. You
Yeah.
are not there to receive anything from the people that you are leading. If you're in a leadership role, that is a one-way relationship.
Yeah.
You give without expectation of receiving anything back.
Yes.
That is what it is to lead. And that doesn't mean that you're giving from something that you don't have, right? You have to receive everything that you end up giving. That's why having your own spiritual house in order, for lack of a better term, is so important, because you have to know how to receive in order to give.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that
Yeah.
list. That's the only thing that I would add.
Yeah, and that's literally, it's taken from 1 Timothy 2, 3 through 13, where it goes through like the qualifications.
Right.
But I love how it like kind of pulled that aside and was like, hey, yes, these are qualities of like a pastor, but hey, if you're going to be in a leadership position, this is what you need to look at.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what does a pastor do? He just leads. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I thought, I was like, that's super cool. But I loved even, and this is the other part that I love, it's like, don't be a novice. But at the same time, like God chooses leaders based on availability, not by ability.
Right.
And by willingness to obedience, not necessarily experience.
Right.
And so we see that a lot throughout the Bible, even. David had no qualifications or abilities or experience in being king, yet he's the one who got anointed,
I would actually argue against that.
other than the sheep. Leading a
That's
bunch
some
of sheep.
pretty good The dude, like, didn't he kill a bear or something?
Yes.
And he didn't even have a spear?
Yeah.
Yeah, I need 2 microphones for this announcement. Listen, hey, if this is bringing value to you, if you're relating to this, go ahead and hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, do all the things that everybody tells you to do all the time, literally always. It really helps the channel out, and let's be honest, this is a message that more young people need to hear. So go for it. All right, back to what you came for.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I would need a spear.
Something.
Yeah.
That would be a great movie scene.
And a lion. They're actually making an animated movie about David.
Like not VeggieTales, David?
Not VeggieTales, no. A little slightly more realistic.
That's
I wish
cool.
that they would make a live action movie about David with,
There's
somewhat of
so
a
many
budget.
things. I also
Yeah.
think David was bipolar, but that's a whole nother thing.
What, did you read Psalms and then
Just
like to,
read Psalms.
Yeah.
David is bipolar. I'm sorry.
yeah, even reading a bit of 2 Samuel, you can kind of see a little bit of
He's
that.
a
but
little all over the place.
yeah, I love it though. So what
Yeah.
else you got?
So, and then the other thing, because again, like Paul's talking to Timothy, who's this young guy, and it's the notorious verse, like, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. And a lot of the people on this channel probably are younger. I think you said they're mostly around my age.
Right.
So I am in a position of leadership, and everyone is definitely older than me.
It's a weird place to be.
I have people that are twice as old as me, if not more. I have people that are over 10 years older than me. I think the one closest to my age is about 10 years older than me.
Right.
So it's this weird position to be in where I'm significantly younger than those
Yeah.
I'm leading. And it can cause quite a bit of insecurities, like within myself. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what do they think? And I always go, they probably think I got this position because, or they think this. It's nothing that any of them have ever said to me.
Right.
It's just stuff that I'm constantly putting on myself. So the next part of this verse and that's the thing, I feel like we do this a lot with the Bible. We take like phrases that sound really cool. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young.
Oh, are you going to talk about setting the standard now?
And we don't read the next part.
Yeah.
And it literally goes into, but set an example for the believers in your speech. Hang on, we got to turn a page. In conduct, in love, in faith, and purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public readings of scriptures, to preach and to teach. Do not neglect your gifts, which have been given to you through prophecy. When the body of elders lay their hands on you, be diligent to these matters and give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. Like, that's a lot
Right. And if
to do.
the underlying message in there is if you don't want to be looked down upon for your youth, you have to set the standard. You have to be the highest example of conduct, love, faith, purity, all of those things.
Yeah.
otherwise, that's what's going to happen. And you see this kind of nihilistic skepticism towards younger generations by the older generations. It's like, it's this never ending thing. Gen X is sick of the millennials who are sick of Gen Z. Like it's so on and so forth.
Baby
right?
boomers also don't like me.
Exactly. What if, though, Gen Z was the generation to set the standard again? What if Gen Z set the standard in purity? What if they abandoned the sexual revolution for a purity revolution? What if they did all of these things and truly became the example of what the church is supposed to look like? What would that do? What kind of ripple effect would that have to previous generations and then to future generations? We don't know. But I will say this: Gen Z is a very unique generation.
Yeah.
Because they're not the first generation to grow up in the digital world.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be. You're at the tail end of millennialism,
I am.
though. Like you're barely a millennial.
I'm a millennial.
Right. But we're also the smallest generation that we've ever had. And so there's a lot of weird, strange characteristics about the Zoomers and also like everything that's happened in all the college campuses this year. The Zoomers are the ones in college right now. And so I feel like God is doing
Is that
something.
the next one, the Zoomers?
Gen Z, Zoomers, Gen Z. Yeah.
Oh my God, y'all, I'm getting old. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you were almost a Zoomer.
I was like, what's a Zoomer?
You're 4 years away.
I like millennial.
But God is very obviously doing something with Gen Z, and it's not
Yeah.
going to stop at Asbury. It's not going to stop at Texas A&M and all these other college campuses. Just wait until these kids get into the workforce. You've never seen an industry full of Jesus freaks.
Right.
So I'm super excited to see what kind of leadership standard we can set even as the youngest generation out there right now in the workforce. But I don't know.
I say that with every generation, there is a common theme, right? So, but there's also a perversion of that theme, like of what I think God intended. Like with millennials, we are a ton of entrepreneurs. We were the ones who were like, I got a better idea. And we were the kind of the ones who were very inventive and like, we're going to start something new. I don't need a boss. I can be the millionaire on my own. But the perversion is that, oh my gosh, millennials are just lazy.
Entitlement's the bigger one too in that.
Yeah, which lazy kind of comes from it.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, we've probably made some of the most progress in such a short amount of time from our inventiveness and our entrepreneurship. But that entitled and lazy is what we're labeled as. And then kind of Gen Z, it's a bunch of crybabies is kind of what y'all are known. That's what at least we think. We think you're a bunch of crybabies.
Have you seen yourselves?
But like the other side of that is, you know, kind of like this revolution that you're talking. Okay, Otto.
Yeah.
My grumpy old dog.
Yeah.
Is like this, you know, I don't want to conform.
Right.
You know, that side that I don't want to conform could be something totally different is if we continue to change that script.
Yeah, this generation's fairly split. It's either completely emotionalistic, what I feel is what reality is,
Right.
and then the other side is moving towards stoicism, especially in the male sphere. A lot of kind of conservative men are flocking to male self-improvement and finding comfort in stoicism and all of those other things. Not that this has anything to do with leadership. I do
Right.
believe that leaders are somewhat stoic. But yeah, it's very interesting what's going on with Gen Z.
And I mean, I say each generation paves the way for the next.
Right.
So, you know, Gen X made a way for the millennials from the boomers. And then like millennials have, you know, made progress and made a way for the Gen Z to be able to start rising up. So always take, like that's what I would love. Like I want my kids to go so much further than I ever did. And our mom says this all the time. She's like, I made this path so far, you take it from here.
Right.
And I've actually been able to start doing that. Sorry, because I work under her now. It's like what she's taken, I was able to easily get to that point of where she was at 40.
I mean, you can find this even in the educational system.
Yeah.
We're learning things that
faster.
2 generations ago they were learning in college, 2 generations ago they were learning in graduate school. Like this is just how knowledge and things advance and things work. So yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all.
Yeah, so I always say in leadership, use the the stepping stools that people have put in front of you.
Right.
Like, yeah, sometimes you will be paving your own new way, but people have already built. Like, go on top of that and keep going. It's going to be so much easier.
Yeah, you can see Timothy definitely did that with Paul.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing, hang on.
They say wisdom is, a smart person learns from their own mistakes. A wise person learns from the mistakes of others. And I think that that's probably the hallmark of Timothy's wisdom, was learning from the mistakes of Paul before he was Paul. And
Yeah,
I
you
think
don't
that's
really
what's,
hear about Timothy constantly being in prison.
Yeah, exactly. But, I do believe that learning from the road that Paul had paved was able to springboard Timothy into kind of a much more exponential, expansive role.
Yeah.
Because, the church in Ephesus was a monster of a church. They were some of the biggest evangelists and servant leaders that they had. They were kind of a big export city, an import city. So they had a lot of opportunities to expand the gospel, and sheesh, they did, man. They were a very effective church.
Yeah, and I loved it because, and you can kind of hear it in like the tone of what Paul's writing.
Right.
It's Timothy felt inexperienced and not able.
Right.
And that's who, kind of like to my point earlier, God continues to show up. Because guess what? You can be the most able person and the most experienced and the most like, I'm an expert in this area. But if you're not available to him, he'll move on.
Right.
It's kind of like in Esther, where he said, you're basically, you can save the Jews, but if you don't, someone else will. Mm-hmm. And, she did. And that was amazing. But again, that's another person. She in no way was equipped or experienced in this, and yet she saved her people. Jesus, he came from nothing. He was a carpenter. He was the son of God.
Well, he was the son of the living
But
God.
I'm just saying,
yeah, different example, but I see what you're saying.
Like, he wasn't a king, what everyone thought he was going to be.
He didn't come in the right packaging.
He was a humble man. And so you can see it all throughout Scripture of God continues to go to those who are not always the most able and the least experienced. Moses had a stutter. His brother Aaron had to talk for him.
Right.
So I just never want people to be like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not experienced enough. Like, just go for it.
Yeah, the worst thing that you can be as a leader is paralyzed. I would much rather follow somebody that is mistaken in their path or that's going down the wrong. Like, I'll ride off the cliff with somebody that's decisive and confident about what they're doing. I 100% will, and I won't think twice about it. But if somebody's indecisive, I won't even go to the promised land with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Which kind of even goes back to why Moses wasn't able to enter the promised land, and it was Joshua.
Right. Joshua has to be my favorite leader in the Bible, by and large. His one mistake was, I think it was not consulting with God about a peace treaty that he had made. And that was his big mistake. But the rest of it, he was just rock solid. Anything that God told him to do, it was considerate done. You didn't have all these problems that they had under Moses of mass disobedience within the Israelite populace. Like, I'm sure those things were happening. Commandments were being broken, but they were handling them in everything they felt like doing. And so Moses, obviously, with revelation straight from God himself, had to teach these people, like, okay, this is how you want to be set apart. This is the way that we are going to conduct ourselves. This is the identity that God has molded out for us, and this is what we're going to walk in, or we're going to pay the price. And they did many times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Joshua, like, you can see how everything culturally changes under him to, like, they picked up his vigor to really walk around in that identity and to embody what God had set them up to be in those previous books.
And talk about, like, how you're saying, I'd follow someone off a cliff. They literally just marched in circles.
Yeah.
I'd be like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like,
You think they didn't trust Joshua?
Why are we walking in circles? Yeah. We're kind of crazy, but okay. But think about it. Like, the Israelites were slaves.
Right.
So you're restoring that will.
Yeah.
And will is the first thing to be broken. When you have any type of, like, a predator, you have to break the will first.
Yeah.
And then you've got control.
And you see that in their desire to constantly go back to Egypt.
Yeah. and kind of like Stockholm syndrome a little bit.
Right.
But then as you know, you're restoring this will, there's all these muscles that now have to grow. You have to
Yeah.
kind of learn right from wrong because you're not told what to do.
Right.
You have to learn, oh, there's natural consequences to things that we do.
Yeah.
So even under Moses, like I'm kind of giving him a little bit of slack, but you're having people that are maybe for the first time getting to truly make decisions for themselves. So with that, you're gonna have mess ups. Like think about when we were like 15, 16, 17, 18, we're starting to make decisions for ourselves. Think about all the things we messed up.
Well, yeah, because we were idiots.
Total idiots.
Yeah.
But as that muscle grows, and then with Joshua coming in, I'm sure he had his, and then that's when the commandments were given was under Moses.
Right.
And then as Joshua's coming in, it's like, oh, wait a second. Cool, we got some control now, so let's start moving this direction more.
And people ask why the Old Testament law was so specific and so stringent, and they completely forget that these people probably had zero capacity for critical thought. They had been told what to do, how to go from point A to point B in explicit terms in slavery for their entire life. Not just that, but for generations by that point, right? And so the ability to pick up a vague, a little bit more vague law like the one in the New Testament, where it's based on principles, not simply just these specific situations where it's based on kind of virtues and morals and things like that, they wouldn't have been able to interpret that. It's like, no, you need to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the beauty of the new law is like, hey, you've graduated from this. And this is another thing that great leaders do, which is why God is the greatest leader of all time. They recognize growth and they change parameters based on that. You may have to do a lot of hand holding in the beginning, but at a certain point, you have to know when to ease up the grip, when to give some more vague basic parameters, and when to let somebody exercise kind of these new muscles that they've formed.
What I do is I do 90-day like trial periods with my team.
Right.
And so for that first month, I'm like right here with you, right? Like we're going through it together.
I don't like this. Okay, there we
And
go.
then the second month, I might be sitting here, right? I'm a little more like I'm still here, but I'm not on you.
Right.
And then the third month, because there's always questions. I'm like, yeah. So what do you want to do? It's making them start growing that muscle themselves. Of okay, I've given you the answers. The first month, I'm giving them to you. The second month, we're going to talk it out.
Right.
Now you get to grow that muscle and decide what do you think you're going to do? What do you think the right answer is?
Very similar to like a police department shadowing program.
Yeah, very similar. But I love that method because, and I won't bring in more than 2 people at a time. That's just my max capacity because I'm one person. I had them through and then I hired another one. And so now like I'm starting that process with her, but the other 2 are solid, good to go. They don't need me to hold their hand the whole time. But yeah, but what really helped me is I started kind of coming into the leadership. And y'all, anything by John Maxwell is just going to significantly help you.
If you're new to this Christian landscape, he's basically the leadership guru.
Yeah, and so this is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It's an amazing book. And 2 years ago is when, I don't know why that one's bookmarked. Apparently it seemed important to me. When I started this whole thing of, I've always been in leadership roles, but actually running my own team of people was completely different than, oh, I'm leading in this area or I'm in a management position at a chain thing. Like, no, this is a ministry with people working underneath me.
Right.
And y'all, ministry is a lot different than corporate world, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Very different. So I started reading that book. And it starts with like an assessment, right? Okay, these are my strengths. This is where I need to grow. This is just not my gig. I'm not good in that area. And what I did is I found people that were good in the areas that I did not have it capacity to work in. I'm like, I'm not good at that. Bring someone that is.
Right.
So that would be another great thing is know your weaknesses as leaders and bring people in that can fill those gaps.
Yeah, self-awareness is huge because in order to be a leader, you have to accept the fact that everything 100% all of the time is your fault.
Yeah. Had that today.
Always.
I had that today.
And even like if it's something that somebody else does that you weren't even brought into, it's like, well, you hired that person, you brought that
Yep.
person in, you trained that person.
Yep.
So, and there's so much freedom in that. People find that intimidating or discouraging, and it's like, no, that's the key right there. Is just this rigid, incredible accountability and responsibility that you decide to take on. That's not only what makes you a good leader, that's what makes you a fulfilled, happy leader, knowing that it's all on you and that's okay. That makes just everything much better. And obviously, I haven't led in the same capacities that you have, but I've even seen that in my own life.
Yeah. I feel like being in leadership is a calling on some people's lives, because no matter what, I always get put into those positions. It doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing, like I'm constantly put into some type of a leadership role. So I do think that, I don't think it's like a gift of the Holy Spirit or anything, but I do think it is a calling.
I think, I'm not so sure about that. I tend to glean on the side of we're all called to lead in some capacity. And we all have to develop these leadership disciplines and leadership skills, but some capacities look different than others. Some capacities it's simply just a family. Other capacities it's a team of people. Other capacities it's a 500 employee company. You just never know. But I think that this is an important discipline for every single person to know, because if you're a follower of Christ, that means you're set apart. And if you're set apart, that means you're different. If you're different, that means people are going to be looking at you as an influence and example anyways. So you have to be prepared to lead. It's not an option for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that no matter where you are in life, like you're going to be an example to someone.
Yeah. And being a better leader is never going to harm any area of your life.
No.
It can only benefit you and, more importantly, the people around you, because the better you are at leading, it means the better you are at serving. And if you become a more effective servant, everyone that comes into contact with you is going to be much better for it. So thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks.
And the scriptures and the work. I just showed up, and this is kind of nice. I think I'm next. What are we talking about next?
Dude, I don't know.
I made the spreadsheet and I don't even look at it. But for now, we're going to clock out because it's nap time and it's like sort of rainy outside. So we're sleepy over here.
I'm actually really great.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sleepy, so I'm going to take a nap. We're clocking out. We'll see y'all later.